How exactly do you take a highly fragile, actively dying biological organism from a farm on the equator and put it into a vase on the other side of the planet before it literally turns into compost? This is Critical Path, where we explore stories and innovations about our global supply chain that connect our world to your everyday life. Welcome to the absolute madness of the global floriculture industry. We need to talk about flowers. Not the poetic, romanticized version of flowers you see in a Renaissance painting, but the brutal, high-stakes, hyper-capitalist reality of moving 90 billion cut stems across the planet every single year. The exact second a cut flower's umbilical cord is severed at a farm in Kenya, Colombia, or Ecuador, an invisible and unforgiving stopwatch begins ticking down toward complete and irreversible biological expiration. This is not just a cute metaphor for fleeting beauty. It is a mathematically absurd logistical nightmare. You see, cut flowers are highly volatile, living botanical tissues. The moment you slice them off the plant, they start to actively respire. They are breathing, consuming their own stored carbohydrates, and sweating out moisture, while racing at a breakneck pace towards cellular decay. Once harvested, the standard cut flower possesses a viable shelf life of approximately 5 days to reach a retail shelf. 5 days. That is your entire window. You have 120 hours to coordinate intercontinental flights, navigate the bureaucratic labyrinth of international customs, discover fair market prices on an algorithmic trading floor, and distribute this delicate flora to grocery stores and local florists around the entire globe before your precious product literally turns into worthless, rotting compost. To resolve this seemingly impossible hurdle, humanity has built a highly integrated, continuous ecosystem over the past century. At the absolute center of this massive logistics machine is Amsterdam Airport Schiphol, acting as the primary air gateway, and the nearby Aalsmeer facility, serving as a high-speed trading floor. This network operates around the clock, deploying specialized cold chains, massive monorail automation, and game-theoretic countdown clocks to cheat biological time. They are essentially playing a massive, multi-billion euro game of biological hot potato, and the floor is lava. Let us dive right into the cold, hard science of it all. The fundamental solution to the perishability problem does not actually lie in building faster airplanes. You cannot outrun biology. Instead, the solution is putting the biological organism into a state of suspended animation. You have to freeze time. The metabolism of a plant behaves somewhat like a college student on a Sunday morning after a particularly rough frat party. If you keep it in cold, dark conditions, it barely moves, it consumes the absolute minimal amount of energy, and it largely ignores its surroundings, hoping the world will just go away. Industry research and long-term empirical practice have defined the optimal core temperature for most cut flowers, including premium Kenyan roses, to be rigidly set between 1 degree and 3 degrees Celsius. This is an incredibly narrow thermal band. It maximizes the metabolic slowdown, massively reducing respiration, limiting water loss, and halting the production of the aging hormone ethylene, all without risking terminal freeze injury. If you drop the temperature below 0 degrees Celsius, the cells freeze, burst, and the flower is dead. If you deviate even slightly above 3 degrees Celsius, the flower wakes up and starts rapidly aging. In fact, even minor deviations of just a few degrees can reduce the post-arrival vase life of the flowers by up to 42%. This makes temperature fluctuations the mortal enemy of the floral wholesaler. A slight breeze on a sunny tarmac is essentially a biological weapon against a shipment of roses. To achieve this level of atmospheric stasis across thousands of miles, a sequence of tightly managed transitions is required from the very moment of harvest. Stems are typically cut during the coolest part of the day and immediately rushed to on-farm chillers. Farms utilize forced air cooling, where high-velocity cold air is channeled directly through the boxes to quickly strip away the ambient field heat. Some of the most advanced, high-volume operations employ vacuum cooling. This is a highly expensive but remarkably rapid process, where water evaporates under low pressure, literally pulling the heat directly out of the core of the biological product. It is basically sci-fi technology being used on a daisy. Once they are pre-cooled, the flowers are transferred to specialized packhouses kept strictly between 2 degrees and 5 degrees Celsius. This prevents rewarming while the staff frantically sort, grade, and pack the stems into cardboard boxes. But these are not just any cardboard boxes. They are heavily engineered enclosures with ventilation holes specifically aligned for the holds of cargo aircraft. And temperature is only half the battle. Relative humidity levels must also be managed with absolute, surgical precision. The operational sweet spot is between 90% and 95% relative humidity. If the humidity creeps up above 95% and condensation forms on those delicate little petals, congratulations, you have just created a pristine breeding ground for fungal pathogens like Borinthrinitis cinerea. But if the humidity drops below the 90% threshold, the product suffers rapid dehydration and wilting, rendering the product completely commercially unviable. This seamless sequence of transitions creates a continuous, invisible thermal tunnel stretching all the way from equatorial plantations to European markets. If it works perfectly, flowers cut in Kenya can arrive at a retail destination within 24 to 72 hours, never once realizing that they have left the farm, entirely unaware that they are flying through the sky at a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. While the flowers remain in their state of deep freeze meditation, blissfully unaware of the chaos around them, the physical logistics network at Schiphol Airport operates at a frantic, breakneck pace. Schiphol functions as the beating heart of the network. Flowers make up approximately 22% of all imports handled at the airport. Think about that for a second. More than a fifth of everything coming into this massive international hub is actively dying plant matter. More than 450 organizations collaborate with Schiphol Cargo to ensure that these perishables pass through the tarmac with the absolute minimum amount of friction. Operators like Air France KLM Martinair Cargo are the heavy lifters here. They deploy dedicated freighters, equipped with advanced cold chain facilities, to keep the environment perfectly stable high up in the atmosphere. But the real danger happens on the ground. Ground handling organizations at Schiphol operate under intense time pressure to minimize the product's exposure to ambient tarmac temperatures. Remember, in the logistics of perishable goods, every single minute spent on the tarmac represents a compounding risk of temperature deviation. To combat this, specialized facilities deploy highly trained teams capable of handling massive volumes of freight in recorded times. Let us look at Donata's cargo division, for instance. They handle up to 42,000 tons of delicate flowers annually out of a total cargo processing volume of 540,000 tons across 10,000 flights. Their teams operate with the terrifying efficiency of a Formula One pit crew. They can typically empty a completely full freighter aircraft of flowers and load them onto forwarding trucks in approximately 90 minutes. Let me repeat that. They unload an entire massive cargo plane and get it onto trucks in 90 minutes. That is a time frame shorter than it takes the average person to casually scroll through menus and finally decide what to watch on Netflix on a Friday night. The surrounding infrastructure is heavily customized to facilitate this exact kind of speed. Over 150 logistics service providers are situated directly in the airport region. Furthermore, the presence of advanced customs clearing systems ensures paperless pre-clearance before the aircraft even touches the ground. The bureaucracy is solved while the plane is still in the clouds. During peak seasons, the system gets completely maxed out. Logistics operators deploy dozens of additional charter flights just to handle the thousands of tons of fresh-cut flowers pouring out of places like Nairobi. And while alternative air corridors, like the Nairobi to Liege route, have emerged to absorb some of this seasonal congestion, Schiphol remains the undisputed crown jewel and primary gateway for the European floriculture trade. It can process a peak daily capacity of 400 tons of perishables. So, the flowers have safely cleared the airport in record time. They have dodged the heat, they have bypassed the red tape, and they are loaded onto a truck. Now they are driven a few kilometers down the road to the Royal Flora Holland auction in Aalsmeer. If Amazon is the defining logistics machine of the modern consumer economy, then the Aalsmeer auction is the absolute high-speed algorithmic trading floor for flowers. It is basically Wall Street, but instead of trading invisible stocks, people are trading massive pallets of highly perishable, aggressively ticking biological time bombs. The facility operates as a massive cooperative, sharing ownership among 3,000 growers. And the volume is staggering. They process a daily volume of roughly 43 million cut flowers and 5 million plants. This facility handles approximately 60% of the worldwide trade in flowers, generating an annual product turnover of €5.4 billion. To prevent catastrophic bottlenecks and clear this astronomical volume of highly perishable assets within just a few hours each morning, the market utilizes a completely fascinating mechanism, the traditional Dutch clock auction. Now, the mechanical framework of the Dutch clock auction runs entirely contrary to the standard English auctions you see depicted in movies or reality television shows. There is no fast-talking auctioneer. There are no participants frantically screaming out higher and higher bids while waving paddles in the air. In a Dutch auction, the auctioneer, or a computerized device, begins by offering the lot at a high price. This starting price is deliberately set higher than what they believe any participant in the room is actually willing to pay. Then, the price clock begins to tick downward. It drops at rapid intervals. The first participant to stop the clock by pushing a button secures the lot at the exact price currently displayed. That is it. There is no such thing as a counterbid. The entire transaction is completed instantly. Because a sale never requires more than a single bid, transaction prices form at a blistering pace of about once every 4 seconds on each of the facility's 35 active price clocks. This terrifying speed allows the facility to process around 100,000 daily transactions in total. This system presents a deeply fascinating study in behavioral economics and game theory. It draws direct parallels to centipede games, where sequential binary choices dictate the outcomes. Put yourself in the shoes of a buyer. You are sweating in your seat. You face incredibly high uncertainty because you absolutely cannot view the private valuations or the intended bids of any of the other participants. You can only view the winning bid when it is already too late. The instant win feature forces buyers to play a massive, high-stakes game of economic chicken. They are constantly trading off between certainty and price. Waiting for a lower price reduces your acquisition cost, making your boss happy, but it dramatically raises the risk of losing the entire lot to a competing buyer who pushes the button just a fraction of a second earlier than you do. Research actually indicates that this extreme time pressure and intense uncertainty cause participants to experience significantly elevated emotional arousal. Their heart rates spike. They are kept aggressively engaged in the bidding process. But here is where the mechanics yield an incredible revelation that completely shifts how you view these fast-paced trades. Your intuition would naturally suggest that the clock strictly ticks in one single direction until the lot is completely gone. Down, down, down to zero. However, when a bidder stops the countdown clock to secure a portion of a lot, they speak into a microphone to inform the auction staff of their desired quantity at that specific price. Once that specific transaction clears, the price clock momentarily runs clockwise. It ticks back up to a slightly higher price before resuming its counterclockwise drop to lower prices for the remaining quantity in the lot. This is brilliant. This subtle upward reset prevents participants from instantly wiping out massive lots at absolute rock-bottom prices. It subtly shifts the economic advantage back to the sellers, creating a highly dynamic, wave-like price motion on the trading floor. Fast clock speeds yield lower bids, increasing the speed of market clearance, but the upward tick ensures the sellers do not get entirely fleeced. It is an intricate, beautiful, and deeply stressful dance of capitalism. Now let us take a step back from the screens and the game theory and take a walk onto the floor. A casual observer walking through the massive refrigeration chambers and sorting lines of the Aalsmeer facility might expect an intense, completely overwhelming sensory experience. You would logically assume that placing tens of millions of cut flowers, lilies, and premium roses inside a single facility would produce an intoxicating floral aroma capable of instantly knocking a person over. However, standing in the middle of the world's largest flower market yields a massive, counterintuitive revelation. The facility does not smell like flowers at all. It smells like a wet refrigerator. It smells like cardboard. It smells like forklift exhaust. But it lacks any recognizable floral scent. This sensory paradox points to two very deliberate industrial mechanisms that prioritize logistical viability over traditional botanical aesthetics. The global supply chain does not care about your poetry. It cares about efficiency. The primary factor contributing to this lack of scent involves the precise stage of maturity at which flowers are traded. Flowers are systematically harvested and transported as tight, closed buds rather than full, open blooms. Biologically speaking, the heavy production of volatile organic compounds, which are the chemicals that generate the characteristic fragrance of flowers, typically does not actually commence until the bud opens and the petals unfold. By maintaining the flowers in a state of suspended animation in low-temperature environments, the metabolic processes required to open the buds are delayed. This ensures that the plant's energy is conserved entirely for the final consumer's vase in their living room. But there is a second contributing factor, and this one is a bit more insidious. It involves an intentional shift in breeding programs executed over several decades. Horticultural breeders develop new flower varieties focusing on extremely specific commercial traits: color consistency, stem length, disease resistance, and post-harvest vase life. Because the biological production of fragrance is a highly resource-intensive process for a plant, cut flowers that produce heavy scents naturally possess much shorter lifespans. They burn the candle at both ends to smell pretty, to maximize post-harvest longevity, and heavily decrease the risk of spoilage during the long, arduous journey from Africa or South America to European markets. The global flower industry has actively, intentionally selected varieties with less pronounced scents. The traditional, romantic sensory experience of the flower has been systematically and purposefully sacrificed to engineer a product capable of surviving complex intercontinental logistics. You are buying a highly engineered survivor, not a fragrant heirloom. And just like the biology has been engineered, the logistics have been digitized. The operational model, centered around physical auction rooms and analog countdown clocks, has undergone a comprehensive digital transformation over the past 2 decades. Back in the 20th century, hundreds of buyers actually sat in rows of stadium seats, facing massive physical clocks, while carts of physical flowers were literally paraded in front of them for visual inspection. The evolution of telecommunications and software systems led to the introduction of remote buying platforms. Now participants can bid digitally via synchronized digital clocks from their own offices across the globe. You could be sitting in your pajamas in an apartment in Tokyo, trading roses that are currently sitting in a cooler in Amsterdam. The current digital standard is centered around a platform called Floriday. This is a centralized cloud platform developed by Royal Flora Holland to handle commercial processes securely. Floriday functions as the leading digital infrastructure for the entire floriculture sector, moving supply and demand interactions firmly online. This transition has fundamentally shifted how transactions occur, with a massive percentage of day trade and contract transactions executing digitally, without the buyers ever once handling, seeing or touching the physical product. To complement this digital sales infrastructure, Schiphol Airport launched the Smart Cargo Mainport program. The goal here is to integrate and share operational data across all the supply chain partners. One highly successful initiative involved establishing data links between specific flower shipment metrics and electronic air waybill numbers right at the source. Under this system, critical data, including the exact number of boxes, the specific flower species, and the exact count of individual stems in each box, are consolidated and assigned a unique global standard code that absolutely cannot be duplicated. This creates perfect, end-to-end visibility. It allows growers in Kenya, ground handlers at Schiphol, and buyers at Aalsmeer to track and trace shipments at the specific box level in real time along the entire intercontinental journey. Yet, despite this aggressive shift toward digital commerce and paperless data sharing, the physical volume of flowers passing through the Dutch hubs continues to require massive, heavy engineering solutions. The virtual world still has to move physical things. The Aalsmeer auction building is quite literally one of the largest commercial edifices on the planet. It covers approximately 999,000 square meters of floor area. The sheer scale of the operation is frequently compared to the entire Principality of Monaco fitting neatly inside its footprint. The building is so obnoxiously large that it forces employees to utilize bicycles and red electric scooters just to commute between loading bays. These scooters look like a weird hybrid version of a Segway and a tiny tractor, and workers zip around the floor like they are in a highly caffeinated Mario Kart level. Internal transport within this massive facility depends on a complex system of Danish trolleys. These are specialized carts designed specifically to hold buckets of cut stems. Over 260,000 of these trolleys are in operation across the network. If you place them end to end, they would stretch across most of the Netherlands. But pushing 260,000 carts by hand would require an army, so Royal Flora Holland operates a massive, automated electric monorail system to move these carts efficiently across the vast facility floors. This system spans over 17.5 kilometers of rail track and coordinates the movement of up to 2,600 individual stacking cars per hour. At this juncture, the engineering logistics yield another mind-blowing revelation. The total daily distance covered by these internal monorail vehicles amounts to roughly 39,000 kilometers. Let me put that into perspective. That means that this automated system is covering a distance roughly equivalent to traveling around the entire circumference of the Earth every single day, entirely within the confines of a single distribution facility. To maintain this massive transport capacity, operations require extreme, computer-controlled coordination. Up to 6 vehicles travel together in tightly controlled formations at high speeds, with absolute minimal spacing, dodging obstacles and routing perfectly to their destinations. To handle incoming air freight shipments from Africa and other regions, Dock Services in Aalsmeer also installed an incredibly advanced automated mechanical sorting system. Previously, the process of sorting incoming cartons by type, stem length, grower, and buyer was executed manually by humans reading labels. As you can guess, this proved to be agonizingly slow and labor-intensive. The introduction of the smart automated conveyor system, built by the logistics automation manufacturer Buma, revolutionized the floor. This system utilizes advanced scanners to instantly read QR codes printed on standardized double stickers on the boxes. This automation massively increased the processing throughput from a sluggish 800 cartons per hour to approximately 2,000 cartons per hour. It substantially reduced processing errors and labor costs, all while protecting the continuous cold chain by getting the boxes into the right coolers faster. But no matter how perfectly engineered this system is, no matter how fast the monorail runs or how cold the chillers are, the entire global floral trade faces its absolute most extreme operational spikes corresponding to specific calendar holidays. Valentine's Day and Mother's Day represent the absolute peak of capacity strain. The entire supply chain groans under the weight of human affection. In the lead up to Valentine's Day, demand for flowers predictably and aggressively spikes, requiring massive, coordinated planning operations up to 6 months in advance. During this heavily compressed window, daily transactions increase by roughly 15%. This forces airport handlers, transporters, and the auction itself to operate at absolute peak capacity. For a sense of scale, consider that Americans alone spend roughly $3.1 billion on flowers in the immediate lead up to Valentine's Day. $3.1 billion. That is an amount of money roughly equivalent to the entire gross domestic product of the nation of Bhutan, spent entirely on actively decaying plant matter in the span of about a week. This massive influx of capital creates predictable but intense spikes in demand that absolutely strain food supply chains and last-mile delivery networks during what is already a busy and weather-dependent winter season. At the end of this massive logistical chain are local retail florists, and for them, this period is a waking nightmare. Trying to walk into a high-volume retail florist on February 13th or 14th without a pre-order is the retail equivalent of asking for a guided tour of a burning building. Stories from retail staff consistently describe a scene of pure pandemonium. Stressed, procrastinating buyers wait until the absolute last minute, burst into the shop demanding something deeply personalized and uniquely tailored to their partner, and then invariably walk out with a standard pre-made arrangement from the cooler after successfully consuming precious, unrecoverable designer time. The pressure at the retail level is heavily exacerbated by the strange logistical nature of anonymous gift-giving. Flower shops frequently deal with customers attempting to send anonymous bouquets. While this sounds romantic and a Victorian novel, in reality, it requires strict store policies to handle instances of harassment or stalking. In extreme cases, recipients terrified of violent exes or stalkers call the flower shops demanding the sender's identity, only to be met with strict customer confidentiality protocols. This bizarre dynamic turns your friendly local neighborhood flower shop into an unexpected, high-stress flashpoint of privacy law and domestic security. So what happens next? Where does this impossibly complex, perfectly balanced system go from here? The answer lies in the ocean. Because air freight remains incredibly expensive and generates a notably high carbon footprint, industry players are aggressively exploring ocean freight as a long-distance transport alternative for cut flowers. Pilot experiments, heavily funded by the Netherlands Ministry of Agriculture, have been actively investigating the feasibility of shipping roses from Kenya to the port of Rotterdam via refrigerated maritime containers, commonly known as reefers. But transitioning to ocean freight presents a severe, almost insurmountable biological challenge. Remember that 5-day biological countdown? Remember how fast the flowers decay? If you put them on a boat, the flowers must suddenly survive 30 to 35 days in transit, compared to the rapid 48 hours afforded by air transport. To accomplish this miracle of suspension, shippers utilize highly advanced controlled atmosphere technologies inside the reefers. They literally physically alter the gas mix inside the container. They lower the oxygen level to approximately 4%, and they raise the carbon dioxide level to roughly 4%. This extremely specific, heavily regulated artificial environment significantly suppresses bacterial growth and massively slows down plant metabolism, preserving the tissue integrity over multi-week voyages. It is effectively turning the shipping container into a deep space hibernation pod. Extensive pre-treatments are absolutely required to make this work. Before they even go into the container, the flower buds are aggressively dipped in fungicide solutions just to suppress any chance of a Botrytis outbreak. They are then administered ethylene-blocking chemicals to prevent the aging hormone from triggering spoilage over the extended timeframe. While this sci-fi ocean transport method is not yet common practice due to wildly varying success rates across different flower cultivars, the successful, widespread execution of controlled atmosphere sea freight could eventually completely upend the competitive dynamics of the industry. It has the potential to cut logistics costs by up to half, entirely rewriting the rules of the global floral economy. The global trade in cut flowers represents a deeply sophisticated intersection of intense biological management, high-speed automated logistics, and game-theoretic auction structures. The central paradox that this entire multi-billion-dollar network solves every single day involves connecting highly perishable, living commodities produced in equatorial climates to global consumer markets before natural senescence strips them of all commercial value. Schiphol Airport acts as the critical physical gateway, facilitating continuous high-frequency flights and rapid ground handling protocols executed within strict 90-minute windows. This air logistics capacity provides the vital foundation for the massive digital and physical trading floor operated by Royal Flora Holland at Aalsmeer. The Dutch clock auction utilizes a rapid, descending price mechanism that forces quick market clearance, executing a transaction every 4 seconds to accommodate the staggering distribution of up to 43 million flowers daily. From a price clock that subtly ticks backward to restore seller leverage, to an automated monorail system that travels the full circumference of the Earth every single day inside a single building, the innovations here are nothing short of spectacular. And perhaps the most telling detail of all is the realization that the world's largest flower market has absolutely no floral scent, simply because breeders have actively selected against fragrance to maximize vase life. Moving forward, the industry faces continuous pressure to scale efficiency while adapting to cloud infrastructure like Floriday and investigating the slow, complex transition to long-distance maritime transport. The capacity of the Dutch floriculture network to maintain its dominant global position depends entirely on its continued ability to optimize physical flow and digital data integration simultaneously, ensuring that when you buy a bouquet, you are buying a triumph of human engineering. We want to hear from you. Knowing that the scent of many commercial flowers has been deliberately bred out of them to increase their shelf life, do you feel cheated by modern logistics, or is the guaranteed longevity of a fresh-looking bouquet worth the loss of its natural fragrance? Add your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe, and make sure to check out our other videos about the global supply chain.